Hey everyone, here we are, somehow halfway to double digits with the fifth episode of TalkiNindies. Um, Thank you for listening, for whoever is listening. And this week, thank you to Dusky Azure once again for delivering some questions to make there be a reason to have this. Um, Before getting to the questions, I did want to just an FYI, especially since I know that um, in terms of people who are followers or fans of the site, there are different versions that I think people are probably fans of. Certainly, there are a lot of followers on Twitter that get sort of a mix of the videos and the reviews. Then there's the YouTube people where there are actually more subscribers in general who watch the videos and who are probably the ones listening to this. But who didn't necessarily go to the proper website, or if you did, you're probably horribly disappointed by its very basic nature. When I started doing this, setting up on Blogger was free. Well, it costs a little bit to host the domain, but that really wasn't a major expense. But really, for the first 5 years, I ran it to just be something that wasn't a burden. It was an outlet for me to write about stuff, to play games. But I finally have decided to for the first time ever, take on hosting as a concern. It's not something that dealing with the financial part of it never has been something that I've enjoyed the thought of. So, but I'm a Cold Fusion developer. That's for people who don't know Cold Fusion. Not a surprise. It's sort of a dying language for really for setting up websites that are hooked up to databases. But that's what I do in the real world. It's what I used to program Nintendo World Report back in the day. Oh, well, at the time that was Planet GameCube. Just as an exercise in how to learn how to code, 25, 30 years ago. But now decided to put my talents to work for myself. So, now that if you're listening to this now, the website www.nindiespotlight.com is up in its new form, which is significantly different, significantly more mobile friendly, and significantly more, I would hope, visually impressive. So if you haven't come to the site for a long time, like I said, I don't blame you. You'll find that there's a lot there, and it's a lot of the same content that the people who usually stick to YouTube may be fans of. In particular, if you're a fan of Steals and Deals, there's a site, or there's a section sort of dedicated to your interest, which rather than being a curated list of games that are on sale, it's the friggin' fire hose. It actually includes the AAA games that I've reviewed that are on sale, and it's like I said, it's the fire hose. It's everything that I've found that is on sale at the moment. So it keeps itself updated because it knows when the sales end and all that. So as you go, if you go every day, you'll literally see what's on sale that day. But I still will make the curated once a week lists that are slightly more trimmed down. For instance, the list this week, there's 100 deals and then there are 90 steals. But when I make the videos, I'm actually probably only going to make them for the top 50. In the past, I've had people not really complain, but complain a little bit about when you have 100 different games in the video, the timestamps get to be kind of hard to manage. They're these little dots, so that isn't so ideal. 50 is probably a better number. Certainly takes me less time to prepare them. But the fact is, if you go to the site, you will see the 100 that I've curated and said, for this period of time are the best, because there are ones I'm leaving out. Like if you go to the fire hose version, so there are different flavors. If you want to just see everything, go there. If you want to see more of a curated look, that will still be available once a week on the same time frame. it'll just be a limited list. That's captured in time, and it'll have the video as well. If you just still want to stick with the video, you just might not be actually seeing everything that's on sale. Pretty much everything that's on sale like you used to. So it's a different thing. And the nice thing about if you go to the site is at the top of all these kinds of lists, it'll list out genres, which you can, if you select a genre, it'll filter out to only be the ones that are representing that genre. So there is a convenience to it to help you quickly acquire what it is you're looking for, because maybe you only care about budget games. Well, if you're looking at the steals and deals, perhaps budget is already there, but perhaps you're only interested in shooters or story-driven games or weird games. If you click on those, you'll quickly filter those and get an idea of what's out there, and then be able to drill down to the different games and what it is you're interested in. So, with that plug out of the way, we'll move on to Dusky Azure's questions. The first question she had was, who are your favorite indie developers and publishers? So had to think about that a little bit. There's definitely an impulse answer for the publisher. The easiest publisher to name that I consistently just completely groove with is definitely Devolver Digital. It's almost, for me, they're the indie version of what Blizzard used to be for me. Back in the day when I was more of a PC gamer, when Blizzard released something, I pretty much was guaranteed I was going to buy it, because there was just a sort of a stamp of quality that it was like anything they make, I'm probably going to really like. So Devolver is really in that same vein, and they're a publisher, so it's not as if they're developing these games themselves into with a certain flavor, but as a publisher, they seem to have a consistent track record of really picking what I would consider winners. They don't always have a certain style, but there are a lot of games that really feel like they have a certain style. They have an uncanny ability to pick some really, really cool, and not all, they are all sort of different. The games aren't all the same mold. They just have sort of there's a certain style or feel to a lot of them. And as we go through this list, because I decided to make a list to help illustrate this, what they really bring to the table. So in no particular order, somewhat in release order in reverse. They're the publisher behind Cult of the Lamb, which was just a weird, great... you'll hear the word weird a lot when I talk about Devolver's games. There are a lot of weird games, and that's probably why I enjoy them so much. Another one, Card Shark, just a completely different kind of game. I don't think it would appeal to everyone. Very memory focused is the odd thing. If you haven't seen Card Shark, you should probably look it up. It is definitely a different kind of... It's not action oriented. It is a very different kind of game. Well worth looking at. Death's Door, which is an action-oriented game from last year, sort of Souls-like and challenge level type of thing, but not a 3D game. It's really a mix of puzzles and action that it's very well made. Loop Hero, which is more of a roguelike RPG strategy kind of thing, just very different. But definitely a compelling game. Disc Room, which is going very old school. The best way to describe it is a dodge 'em up. You're just trying to survive in a bunch of rooms as long as you can, which gets to be very difficult very quickly. But it's, in order to make things more interesting, they have secondary objectives. Not just, the objective isn't always to live the longest. There are also sub-objectives that you want to unlock, of things like being killed by different types of blades, or being killed within a certain period of time, like sometimes really quickly. So it's just a very old-school kind of odd game, but I enjoy it a lot. Carrion, which is a sort of a blob-like monster Metroidvania kind of experience. One of those games that I had to finish. Um, and it was a surprise because I'd seen it at PAX, and they had a limited demo of it, and like the core action of it, moving around as the monster, grabbing people and eating them, that was obviously really cool, and it had there was a sort of a sick thrill to it because the people scream and there's that was just a lot of fun to then chop them up. But I wasn't sure whether or not the full game would necessarily get old because it's like there's only so many people you can eat before that'll get old. That's not really that's not enough to make the entire game interesting. But I was really amazed that the final game, you really did have progression. You really did gain new abilities that were important and changed the way you played. Whether you were trying to be a bit more stealthy or different things, you had to change your size a lot of the time, which involved a strategic component. So just that game, I really enjoyed. Heave Ho, which is a great family game. Um, you need everybody to have a certain level of skill because it is super frustrating if you have one person that's sort of the weak chain the weak link in the chain. But not terribly hard. It's mostly about you have to be able to grab on either side and you have to understand using momentum and stuff like that. But just a very silly, funny, strange, collaborative co-op game. Let's see, what else we have? Trying to get back to where my list was. Oh, there. My Friend Pedro, one of the weirdest kind of shooters. The controls definitely take getting used to, and that can be the killer for people. But it's sort of like, think about if you were playing a game sort of as Deadpool. You're going to do a lot of killing, and it's very creative, and you get slow motion, but you can jump onto a hook that's on a chain, and you're hanging upside down, shooting people with dual gun in each hand, shooting people. It's a really creatively violent game. Gato Roboto, which is a great sort of black and white minimalist in a way Metroidvania with a cat in a huge cat suit. But if you haven't seen it, you should look it up. If you like Metroidvanias, it's not very long, but it's very classic, and it's very cute. Katana Zero, which is highly recommended, and it's one of those games that's sort of anomalous. I actually list it in my top story-driven games because the story in that game is just totally bonkers. I really wish they'd make a sequel so you can see what sort of happens next. But the action in it, it's very, very unique, very violent, but it's a great challenge. Then let's see, next is Ape Out, which is the music. The music alone is almost worth the price of admission for me. Very jazz oriented, but the music is responsive to what's going on as far as the action you're doing, which is more like a beat 'em up, with you bashing through people, grabbing people as human shields, and then when you get to the end, it's sort of touching when you find out what all this is about. But well worth a look. Another one, Gris, which is one of the top story-driven games on the system. Beautiful and well worth a look if you. Oh, it's story-driven in a sense, but it's a very, very cool, very pretty, very fulfilling kind of game. Piku Niku, which is great for a weird game. Again, you can play it co-op. It's a bit strange when you play it co-op, and you do need to work pretty hard in some cases. But just a quirky, kind of strange, but very family-friendly game. Swords of Ditto, which is a great Zelda-like, but has all kinds of bizarre weapons that you can use, and it has a unique flavor. Let's see, The Messenger, old school. Old school. It has both 8-bit and 16-bit. 8-bit feels, the 8-bit early part is really the best part of the game. That feels much more classic Ninja Gaiden kind of thing. Then it moves when it goes to 16-bit, it's more of a Metroidvania feel, and that's where people, you might lose interest. I mean, it takes a while to get to the 16-bit stuff, but it's the weird thing is I found that getting through the 8-bit stuff was so rewarding, and then the 16-bit stuff was just different enough that I sort of lost interest. But still, excellent game. Minute, and I'm still going. This is one publisher. These guys, like I said, they have a talent for picking very good games. But another one, Minute, a very creative, kind of Zelda-like. If you haven't played it, kind of Zelda-like in a way, but you only have 1 minute to do anything before you die. So it's sort of a Zelda-like adventure that has a puzzle-solving component, because you really just have to run out. You have to sort of figure out what you need to know, so the next time you do it, you can complete this objective, which then allows you to do something the next time. But it's just a very different kind of game that's creative, and one of those things I love about indies. It fits that mold perfectly. Another one, Enter the Gungeon, roguelike shooter that has some of the most bizarre enemies anybody's ever seen. My favorite is bullets that shoot. There are living bullets that shoot at you. Just conceptually, that's funny. Then Broforce. Broforce is such a great celebration of 80s and 90s excessively amped up heroes, and it's just it's a great weird side-scrolling run and gun kind of game that's worth a look. Hotline Miami, which is very well known and infamous, very difficult, very bloody, very much has its own art style and way of doing things, but was popular for a reason. And then just as upcoming stuff, they're going to publish Return to Monkey Island. Anything involving Monkey Island I'm interested in. And then there's a game I saw a trailer for called Gunbrella, which just looks weird and promising. So that's it for Devolver. They've published some amazing stuff, so it's almost impossible not to discuss the publishers that have the greatest impact and have done the best job. It's pretty much impossible not to mention them. Another publisher that I really appreciate, which is they're made with the formation of two different studios I liked before, which was Image and Form and Zoink, but it's Thunderful. So just a list of their accomplishments. Anything in the SteamWorld series, so whether it's Dig, Quest, or my favorite Heist, they've got more coming from SteamWorld. Pretty much all the SteamWorld games have been very good for different, and mostly for different reasons, because you've got Heist, which is strategic, you've got Quest, which is more of a deck builder, and then you've got both of the SteamWorld Dig games, which are more Metroidvania flavored. But they're always very well made, and they're always compelling. I really enjoyed Flipping Death, one of the best adventure games out there. Weird sense of humor, just strange characters. Zoink definitely has a style, because before Flipping Death, they'd made Stick It to the Man, which was in that same vein, just a very oddball kind of game with strange characters and funny. And compelling, but they also published Lost in Random, which I enjoyed. I felt like that game didn't get as much attention as it should have. I liked it. It was different. Both of the Curious Expedition games, which are great strategy games that are challenging. Lonely Mountains Downhill, which one of the toughest. If you want to play a tough sports game. Trying to bike down a mountain is, it is a tough game, but it just keeps you going, and it's compelling. And when you find alternate routes and stuff, those can be really challenging. They're going to cause you to die in a bloody mess over and over and over. But when you pull off, going on an alternate route that you find, and when you make a jump over some crazy gorge or things like that, there's just something very rewarding about it. Definitely a game worth taking a look at if you've if you've not looked at it before. It's hard, but it is fun. Another one that's a weird one, Say No More, with a guy who he plays a guy who's walking through his life, deciding to finally, I guess, assert himself, and there's different ways of saying no or doing things to sort of tee people up, like like you can to really piss somebody off, you can, while they're telling you something, you can like do a slow clap that's rude, basically, and then have different types of no. You can have an amped up no, or you can do more of a chill no. It's a strange game, but I thought it was really clever. And then the most recent one that they published that is I'm a huge fan of is Curse to Golf. Just the world needs more roguelike sports games. Curse to Golf proves that definitively. It is just, I love roguelikes, but something about taking those classic golf mechanics and making a roguelike out of it. Brilliant idea. It's incredibly well executed. It's one of those that you're happy to see that the idea worked out. The first iteration, the idea had already worked out. A lot of time when you see these kinds of meldings of ideas, you'll end up walking away saying, well, it's a cool idea and it mostly works, but I'm really looking forward to, I hope they make a sequel, because then it'll be better. Certainly I would imagine you could make a better game, but Curse of the Golf, they got it sufficiently right the first time that it's well worth talking about. You don't have to wait on it. You don't need to wait for a sequel. It's already a really solid game. Then 2 upcoming games they've got coming. Lego Brick Tales. I played that at PAX East. It is the most Lego of all the Lego games, because you've got the really popular mainline Lego games, which are sort of family action-oriented type things. There was the Lego Builder's Tale, or that was more puzzle-like. You had Lego Worlds, which was just sort of an open-ended mess. It was a cool idea, but it just you lost the will to play pretty quick, or at least I did. It was interesting and you could do cool things, but I don't know, it's lightweight and it just didn't really work. Lego Brick Tales is interesting because it has a puzzle component, but for the first time you really are going to feel like you're building with Legos. It's just you're doing it in an objective oriented way, and there's physics being applied too. So if you need to build a bridge, you have to, certainly you'll build it to look aesthetically very Lego, but you actually have to build it in a way that it can hold, it can hold up somebody walking across it, type of thing. And you end up building these structures. They don't just let you build with anything. They're going to give you, a package of pieces that you can use, and the pieces aren't always ideal. So you do have to. It's very, very much like playing with Legos. That you have an idea, you're going to make it work. Maybe you don't have, maybe 50% of what you have or 75% of what you have works perfectly for building that, but the other, the last 25%, you've got to figure out how to make what you have otherwise work. So it is in that mold. It is definitely challenging, because, and it makes sense, because when you think of building something with Legos and you're doing it in a 3-dimensional space in particular, as you build, navigating to see where you need to put pieces and how you need to hook them up and stuff like that, it gets challenging. And I think if anything, that's going to be what makes or breaks the game for people, is whether or not they can sort of grok the way that those controls work. I think they probably did the best you could choose to do with a controller in terms of using both sticks and understanding how to zoom in and how to change the angle so you can see what you need, and then you can grab your piece and put it precisely where you want it. But I enjoy, like I said, I think it is the most Lego-like Lego game I've ever played, so I'm curious to see more of it. Then another one coming up that I've seen just ads, the trailer for and stuff, is Swordship, which feels a lot like I enjoyed Agent Intercept a lot earlier this year. Swordship feels sort of in that same kind of has a very cinematic feel, but an action-oriented feel, and it just looks really cool. So those are two publishers that I'm a big fan of, and listing out games that it makes it pretty clear why I have some love for them. Two developers that I'm a fan of. I love Tribute Games. They worked with Dotemu to make the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. They're the people behind that. They also made Panzer Paladin, which is a great old school 8-bit kind of game, but feels very modern. Very cool, very very fun feel to it. And then the roguelike Flint Hook, which love Flint Hook. I really if you haven't checked out Flint Hook and you like a good challenge, it's very swashbuckling, swinging on your rope, and mixing it up. It's a game that I really enjoy. Another one is Drinkbox Games. They made both of the Guacamelee games, which were both excellent. But I'm an even bigger fan of Nobody Saves the World. Probably one of my favorite games this year. Their art style is very quirky. All the different forms that you can take, and the different powers that you can use, and then you need to recombine those powers in order to complete quest objectives or to get through dungeons. It's just a really great game, and it's actually also great fun to play co-op. Makes the game a lot easier playing a co-op, certainly. But it's just Nobody Saves the World is a really really great game. But the Guacamelee games were also excellent. So Drinkbox Studios is another one that's really good. And then it would also be criminal not to mention Supergiant Games. So Hades, Transistor, Bastion, excellent developer. So that gives you an idea. Just mentioning other ones that are other publishers, developers that are also really have some great games. Team 17 certainly. Nicholas, Team Meat, Team Cherry. Yacht Club is out there. The thing is, Yacht Club is one I just haven't matched up with much. I ended up getting a code for Shovel Knight, King of Cards, which I really enjoyed. But just in general, I've never really been successful at matching up with them. So I'm aware of their reputation, and I've played one of their games that was really good. But I'll mention it only because I know that a lot of people really like Yacht Club, and I always hear good things. And I played a downstream variation on Shovel Knight, which I found to be really really cool and well made. So hopefully that sums up. Probably giving you far more answer than you were looking for, but hey, for favorite indie publishers and developers. Second question from Dusty Azure was, I've seen some recent debate about the lack of creativity and risk being taken by the main game developers and publishers in their IPs compared to the indie sector. And I mean that sums up indie game developers versus AAA game developers in a nutshell. And that's why I very much appreciate indie developers, and really believe that in order for the games industry to survive in a healthy way, they're a necessity. In a way, very similar in a way to the way I think Nintendo is a necessity for the games industry to survive. Just to diverge on Nintendo slightly, all the complaints that people have about Nintendo, making games that are too quote kiddie, or whatever your qualms with Nintendo may be, their hardware innovations in particular, and just the types of games and experiences they've opened the door to mainstream audiences. I mean, they've created genres outright. They have quirky games. It's just they do everything big. So in some ways, the risks that Nintendo takes feel very indie like. They just do things that, they make fitness games. They do things that people don't expect, and there a lot of them are big swings that are risky, and not everything works. Labo is a great example of a big swing that it just didn't pay off, but stuff that you'd never expect anybody to do, they do it. So I think indie games and Nintendo have a lot of things in common. And for indie developers, it's the genre blending that I think is so critical. It wasn't up until, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. For a long time, when I was a kid, or genres were really locked in. I mean, a game was it was absolutely a beat 'em up, or was an action game, or was a shooter, or a strategy game. Blah blah blah. There all those different things. But games, you'd walk to certain genres, and you were a genre fan, and your expectation was that games would fit that mold. I mean, you certainly had variety, because you had you could have action RPGs, you could have Western RPGs, you could have JRPGs. There are flavors like that, but the essence of what that genre was really didn't change greatly. But now you have the indie developers shaking things up and doing things in a new way that are odd, that take risks, and make these great amalgams of different ideas that it's a risk, and that's why the big companies outside of Nintendo probably shy away from doing it. They don't want to take the financial risk and the possible reputational risk of doing something that's a big flop. So in a way, you can understand why they're averse to trying to do these things. But when you have games that come out like Crypt of the Necrodancer, so a rhythm and music game that's also a dungeon crawler, has a strategic component, certainly. Just a very thoroughly odd game, but great idea and well executed and compelling. Making a game like that, or making half the ones I listed for that were great games that I played. A lot of them, big publisher simply wouldn't. They'd shy away from doing stuff like that, because it would seem too odd, or it would seem too niche. And yet, the thing is, for a healthy games industry, I think what you really need is you need more niche. There are niche audiences out there, and the thing is, maybe some of them don't even play a lot of games, but if you had the right game, it would pull them in. And once you pull them in, maybe they understand that there's a bigger world that they're more interested in. This is a strategy Nintendo is really known for. I mean, that was the Wii in a nutshell. The Wii was designed to get people to, and Wii Sports was the poster child for how you create a new segment. Like you pull in people who have not been traditionally gamers ever, and you put something in their hands that they can relate to and that they enjoy, and they potentially then become bigger gamers. I mean, certainly there are tons of people that bought the Wii and they only played Wii Sports, so in that way, to a degree, the strategy failed, but there were tons of people that it did work, and they became convinced that, hey, there are games that I might enjoy, and maybe games are something that would be great. But also with Nintendo's kiddie reputation, obviously they bring them in young. You suck people in with Pokemon or with Kirby or things that are super cute and very appealing, and then you get them to progress to something like maybe what you could start at Mario, but Mario is a little tougher than, say, an average Kirby game. But you could suck them in with Animal Crossing, obviously. but then try to build from there. So you get them into Pikmin, you get them into Zelda, you certainly could get them into Splatoon, and you make games that aren't made for hardcore gamers, that aren't made for the necessarily the mass audience, but that are very good at targeting less experienced gamers who are trying to learn to like games, first-time gamers type of thing. Baby's first game. But I mean, a great example of a game in that vein, Yono and the Celestial Elephants. Probably a bit basic for a lot of folks that have played a lot of Zelda games over time, but undeniably cute, extremely accessible, and a great place it's a starting point for new gamers. So I think that the indie market is it's probably too big. There is simply too much coming, and unfortunately, there's a substantial portion of what's out there that still fits into that what people used to think of indie games very commonly, and what a lot of people unfortunately still do. There is a lot of shovelware out there. There's a lot of games that shouldn't have been released in the state they're in. Were not necessarily well conceived. Were some of which were created seemingly more as a cash-in than making something that's legitimately good. But honestly, we get AAA efforts that feel like that sometimes as well. They aren't without their black eyes in that space, whether you're a big developer or a small one. But what I'd like to see more of is as much as Electronic Arts gets criticized, rightfully so in a lot of cases. They've done things like they partnered with Thunderful to produce Fave, and there's another. I think Lost in Random was another one that they collaborated. I think that's the way, hopefully, to see some of these things come around. That you get a big publisher that creates an arm that's made for focusing on and publishing for indies. Oh, and another one doing it is Ubisoft. I think that's a nice compromise to sort of get something in the middle where you have big publishers that create an arm that isn't dedicated to making smaller games in itself, but they're dedicated to finding games that are taking risks that aren't as obviously Ubisoft makes these massive games like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and all that stuff, but them creating a segment that has a sole focus on finding or cultivating development that's geared toward smaller experiences, more unique experiences. I think that's a great sort of compromise, that you could have small developers suddenly get this big megaphone of a platform, of somebody who's going to tout their game and who's going to help them through the process of turning what may be the origins of a great game into a truly great game. So that's what you're hoping. I don't know if on the ground the experience is quite like that, but that's what you'd like to see is bigger developers on the lookout for talent, not to necessarily acquire them, but to cultivate them and certainly then get a financial stake in their success. I think that is a great model. But in that way, maybe bigger publishers to some degree, the in development programs that they have become potentially something like a farm system, like you see in baseball, where they'll take a chance on these different ones, cultivate them, and there may be people that then come out of those come out of those small studios, or maybe they acquire the whole studio itself, which I'd prefer they didn't acquire the studios. Let's stop doing that and consolidating. But I think that there's a mold there that makes sense, and it gives a lot more indie developers who have great ideas an opportunity to find more than just a modest success. Because unfortunately, with indie developers, you can make a great game, but there's just so much out there that there's so much noise that unless you accidentally, through certainly some amount of luck, that you get all the word of mouth that suddenly everybody discovers you, which does happen, but it's hard. That's not everybody can replicate that, and obviously there are more things out there that can all go viral. So I think these, like I said, these not just the normal indie publishers like Devolver, but I think the big publishers being out there taking some risks, at least in supporting smaller developers and co-publishing sort of their games. I'm hoping that can be a good compromise, and you can see the AAA publishers not taking a direct risk, but still engaging in helping cultivate the indie gaming scene and creating a wider variety of games. So hopefully that answered the question, I would think, thoroughly. And thank you to Dusky Azure again for asking some thought-provoking questions. She actually sent me a few more, so we got plenty of material moving forward for another week or two. But check out the new site. Please, if you have any questions, send them in. This entire experience is hinging on people having questions and me providing my unique long-winded answers. But it was fun. I hope to have another chat with everybody again, and I'll talk to you guys next time.